Hello and welcome to the Munro Nutrition Clancast. I am Jason Munro. This is episode 16. Now, a bit of a different one today. I thought it would be helpful for me to record an episode about my West Highland Way experience. So, for those that don't know, I'm sure you do because I sent enough emails and spoke about it enough on my Instagram stories, but on the 1st of July, on Friday the 1st of July, I set out to do the West Highland Way in 3 days. Now, traditionally, at a push, people do this in 5 days, 7 days, if they're kind of doing it as more of a holiday, anything up to 14 days. There are 13, do I want to call them villages? A mixture. Because Fort William's a city, isn't it? So I don't know what Mulgai would be. But anyway, there's basically 13 stops along the route, okay? So including the start and end point. So the West Highland Way is a 96-mile route from Mulgai in Glasgow to Fort William in the Scottish Highlands. Now, it is something I've wanted to do for a very long time. But I also like to do things for charity. So you may remember 2 years ago, don't mind if you hear my mouse clicking, I'm on the West Highland Way stuff so I can talk through all of this. A couple of years ago, during the first lockdown, in fact, 2020, and at the end of May, I decided I was going to go out and do 100,000 steps in a day. I just decided, let's go and see if I can do this. Why don't I donate to charity in the process? So I went out and I did it for Beat, which is an eating disorder charity, the same charity I supported for the West Highland Way. And I did it. I can't remember the exact results. I posted them on my Instagram, but it was something like 15 hours or 14 and a half hours. I set off at 4 o'clock in the morning. It actually ended up like 130,000 steps, 55 miles. Of almost non-stop walking, and I absolutely ruined my feet. I was so underprepared for it, but I didn't know what to expect, right? I enjoy walking, I climb a lot of hills, I've climbed many Munros, I just like it, and I knew I could go out and do it, I just didn't realise what sort of mess it was going to make of my feet. So, you can imagine that was a bit of a worry. When setting out to do 96 miles across 3 days. Now, not only that, when you have a social media presence, and when you like you're doing something for charity, you want as many people to know about it as possible, that creates a certain level of accountability. Here is something I said I am going to do. I am asking you to donate this money to charity in good faith that I am going to be able to do it. So there's a bit of pressure there. But I already had the evidence to say that I could do 55 miles in a day. And I knew that if I could do 55 miles in a day, I could certainly do 96 over 3 days. So here's how it went anyway. Day 1, Mulgai, on the Friday. Now, first of all, it's very tricky to plan a 3-day route on the West Highland Way. 4 days is a doddle, 5 days is a doddle. Like I said, there are 13 villages along the way. So the trouble you have is trying to split 96 miles up into 3 equal parts. That was the problem. And there are things I wish I'd done slightly differently. But I'll talk about those because, I have had a few people message me since saying, I'd like to try and do this. So this will be helpful for them. So day 1, Mulgai, and I went from Mulgai to Inversnaid. Now, Inversnaid isn't traditionally a stop that's encouraged on like the websites and stuff. It's not one that they mention, but it's one you can absolutely stop in. So Mulgai until Inversnaid was honestly a doddle. It really was. Let me get the big map up here. So when you leave Mulgai, Mulgai is actually great because it makes such a big deal of it. So, like, the start point is in the town centre of Mulgai, and they have this big, massive sign, this big stone. Then they have these big steel plaques. Like, it was so cool. Like, I got some nice pictures. And yeah, I was in the Falkirk Herald, our local paper, a picture of me and my son, because my eldest wanted to get up and come through with me and see me off and all that, and it was beautiful. And we got a picture, and he and I were in the paper together, which was lovely. But yeah, they have this in the town centre. They make such a big deal of it compared to Fort William, who have like a statue of a guy sitting down. And that was it. But yeah, in Mulgai, they make such a big deal of it. And I had actually also looked at doing it in reverse order. So again, one of the things I found difficult was splitting it up into 3 days. And I even looked at it, getting the train to Fort William and coming backwards. But after I did a bit more reading, and people do it that way, by the way, but after I did more reading, the idea behind it is, what's the word I want to use? I'm not sure. Yeah, the symbology of it. Yeah, it's meant to be symbolistic. Is that a word? Anyway, the symbology behind it is you are supposed to be turning your back on Glasgow, turning your back on the big city, turning your back on industry, and walking into the peace and the beauty and the tranquility of the Scottish Highlands. And that really resonated with me. I did think, do you know what? I don't think I do want to do it from Fort William and come back the way. I want to do it what I kind of believe to be properly after reading about that and learning a bit more about it. So I was like, nope, I am going to make this work in 3 days. Let's do it. So, looking at the map, I eventually broke it up into my 3 pieces with much faffing about. But Inversnaid was going to be my first stop, which is about 3/4 of the way up Loch Lomond. So from Mulgai, I went to Drimmen, which would traditionally be one of the stops. Balmaha could potentially be a stop. There's a lovely inn there called the Oak Tree Inn, where you get the best burgers. Then Balmaha goes to a place called Riverdennan. And then from Riverdennan, you go past one of the Munros, Ben Lomond, one I've not climbed yet. And then you arrive at Inversnaid. So my first day, I think, was a 32-mile day. And I did it in 11 hours. And it was genuinely very easy. Honestly, very easy. Just to preface this, I did not train for this at all. Zero training. I did not go and do any long walks. I did not go out and do like 10 milers at the weekends just to like try and prepare myself for this. I walk up a local hill frequently. That's a couple of hours up and down. The dog gets walked for an hour every night. That's the limit of my training activity. For this kind of distance, like just walking distances. So just to let you know, I didn't train as such to do this. I just knew I could do it. So 32 miles was going to be day one, from Mulgai to Inversnaid. Now, at the back of my mind, my biggest worry was going to be my feet. I knew that as long as I could keep my feet intact, I could do this. No problem. So that was my biggest concern. Now, the last time I did a big walk, as I said, I wore trainers' running shoes, but while they were great for running, they weren't great for walking, and I ended up with huge, horrible holes in my feet. I had some plasters. I didn't have half the stuff I took with me this time. I had 6 pairs of clean, dry socks with me. I had powder to go inside my socks to absorb any moisture and keep them dry. I had zinc oxide tape, which is the tape that boxers wrap their hands with beneath their gloves. I had 2 big strips of that with me, different lengths, pair of scissors to cut them up. So basically, any time, I'm going to pretend like I did this every 5 miles. I didn't. Any time I felt my feet starting to get a little niggly in any shape or form, I would stop and take my socks off. To be honest, I think the first time I did this was actually Balmaha, so I'd already walked a serious distance before I did it for the first time. It wasn't actually, it was Drimmen. I stopped in Drimmen, at a bench on the other side of Drimmen, and checked out my feet. I swapped socks, taped up any hot spots, looked after them, everything was tickety-boo, and I carried on. Now, genuinely, the first 20 miles of this was easy. Possibly a little more. I'm just kind of going from memory here, but the first 20 or so miles was a doddle. It was not very hilly. There weren't really any steep inclines. You were on main roads for a fair bit. So you were on kind of level tarmac quite a lot. So yes, there are a lot of paths for the West Highland Way. But in the early stages, you do have to join main roads quite a few times to walk from one part of the West Highland Way to the next part. I can see them on the map here. So, for the most part, the first 20 miles was a doddle. And if you go onto the westhighlandway.org website, you also see the elevation profile. You'll see that for most of the first stint, it's not hilly at all. It's really when you get from Inverarnon to Tyndrum and beyond that it really starts to pick up. But the first 20 or so miles was a doddle. Now, I can tell you exactly when it started to get a little more tricky and exactly when I started to slow down. And this was when I hit Balmaha. Now, I love Balmaha. It's one of those places that I would jump in the car and just drive to go and have a wander about. It's a lovely wee place. And as I said, the Oak Tree Inn, the Oak Tree burgers are tremendous. But once you get there, and you go beyond the Oak Tree Inn and you come round the corner, there's like a kind of jetty bit where boats get launched. There's also a boatyard there. You have, this is where the West Highland Way leaves the main road for a long time. And you come round that corner and there's a road that goes up to the right, but the path goes straight on. And you get to this kind of viewpoint at the end called Balmaha Pier. And from there, that's it. You are on the West Highland Way path. It is a rocky, up and down path that goes along the coast of of Loch Lomond, the east coast of Loch Lomond, and that was when it started to get very tricky. Now you'll see some beautiful beaches. You'll go through some little campsites. You'll see some spectacular scenery, but it did get very difficult in places. The first 20 miles, every time I looked down at my Garmin, 5 miles had passed, 4 miles had passed, 5 miles had passed. I was cruising so quickly in the initial stages. The weather was great as well, which helped. And then when you hit the kind of coastal path of Loch Lomond, that's when every time I look down at my Garmin, I'm like, oh, come on, 2 miles, are you joking? 1.5 miles, come on, I've been walking for ages. That's when it felt like it really slowed down. Then I went through Rowerdennan, which is, there's like a bar there. It's where people park to go and climb Ben Lomond. You pass like a youth hostel, a bunkhouse. There's quite a few honesty boxes along the way as well, which was really nice, like a converted phone box and a couple of other things. And then after that, it was just a long kind of hike into Inversnaid. Now, I stayed at something called the Inversnaid Bunkhouse, which I would highly recommend. I would also mention that they do a transfer. It's actually 800 metres uphill from the West Highland Way, perpendicular to the West Highland Way path. So you ideally do not want to be adding an unnecessary 800 metre incline onto your day. So you ring them up, they have a car that they send down, and the guy picks you up. Now, I got picked up with a girl, I think her name was Claire, an English girl called Claire. The two of us were getting transferred up to the accommodation together. And she was just making conversation because I looked knackered, which I'd just done 32 miles, right? 11 hours of constant walking. And she said, "Oh, where have you come from?" I says, "Oh, Mulgai." She went, "Yeah, but where have you come from today?" And I went, "Yeah, Mulgai." She's like, "Oh my God, it's like 30 miles. I'm like, "Yes." But honestly, I left at 6 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, 11 hours. I left at 6 o'clock in the morning from Mulgai, and I got to the bunkhouse at 5 p.m. Oh no, I got to Inversnaid at 5 p.m. And I called the guy when I was like 5 minutes away, and he came down and picked me up. So I was in the bunkhouse, checked in. They have, it's like a hostel, right? It's basically a hostel, and they have pitches outside to camp. There are a couple of touring caravans that you can actually pay to stay in. I was in a lodge out the back next to the river, which was lovely. It was just this wooden building. I think staff lived above, and there's like an apartment above it. I think it was staff that lived up there, and below was two separate bedrooms with separate security doors and a shared bathroom stroke shower, toilet stroke shower. I had the room on the left, and I stayed there for the night. Now, it was great. I was showered, I was changed, I had my trainers and comfy socks on. I went up, I booked myself to go for dinner at like 7:30, I think. I sat outside in the sunshine and read my book, charged up everything, had my battery pack charging in the room. It was great. It really was. The first day was just spectacular, and it really put me in such a great mood for what was ahead. And not only that, watching the donations roll in as well was just amazing. So yeah, I went in, had my dinner. Now, I'd been walking all day. I had been eating as I went, little and often, not stopping to have like big pack lunches or anything like that, just eating every hour or so, making sure something was in there for my body to run on, because obviously burning thousands of calories walking those distances. I went up to the restaurant, had a big dinner, had a pudding. What did I have, actually? I can't remember what I had for dinner. It was a cheeseburger, funnily enough. Talking about burgers again, as I did in the last episode. Big cheeseburger, chips, dinner. Ginger sponge pudding with custard. A few bottles of beer, 2 bottles and a half to be precise, because I was too tired to get through the third one. And off I went to bed at 9 p.m. because I knew I was going to get up at 4 the next day and set off as close to 4 as I could. So everything was packed. I was ready to go. Up I got at 4 a.m. I had the 800-metre downhill walk to do first of all from the bunkhouse to get back to the West Highland Way, which was fine. But the problem was, I stepped out the door and it was a torrential downpour for 2 hours. So I think I left at like 5:30. So from 5:30 to 7:30, it just rained. And all the work I had done with waterproofing, my wife got me a really great jacket a few years ago for a birthday or Christmas for taking up the hills, and it was wonderful. And I washed it before I went. I did all the TX direct washing stuff. I put all the waterproofing back in it. It lasted an hour before it was saturated. Where my straps from my bag were touching the jacket, the rain just ran into them. My t-shirt was getting wet. It wasn't great. And you can imagine the panic I was having, because instantly I'm like, oh, my feet are going to get soaked. I'm going to be walking in wet boots for 40 miles, because this was going to be a 40-mile day, Inversnaid to King's House. I was panicking. So I did walk for a while. I just stayed wet for a while, and I thought, do you know what? I will wait until this rain. I'm not going to change into anything just now. There's no point. I was checking the weather as I went. It said it wasn't to be that heavy. That was to be the worst of it. So I was like, let's just get this by. And get changed into your waterproofs and change your t-shirt and stuff once it eases off. So I continued walking for a while, and then it did lighten up. So I found a sheltered place. I'd already stopped to put my waterproof trousers on before I left the bunkhouse, because they had big gazebos outside. So I sat under there where it was dry and did that. Took my jacket off, took my t-shirt off, dry stuff on. I just put my waterproof jacket on, like my dog walking jacket, which is literally like wearing a plastic bag almost, completely and entirely waterproof, but also a bit sweaty. So I had to have that trade-off. But far better to be a little damp and a little sweaty than fucking soaked to the skin. And my shoes weren't too bad. They actually held up really well initially because I had done all the waterproofing work with those as well. They were a good pair of Salomon GTX Gore-Tex boots that I've used a lot and been up many mountains with them, and they've been amazing. But the hours I was doing, they did eventually get wet. All the water that kept running down my waterproof trousers onto them, you can't have that going for hours and hours. Eventually, you're going to get wet feet. It was fine for a long time. Saturday was easily the hardest day of my life. Easily. 40 miles, 15 hours it took. Raining on and off pretty much all day. I did get to a point where I got back into my shorts and took my waterproof trousers off. The jacket was on for most of the day. But yeah, that was the day that everybody's messages really got me through. I phoned my wife crying a couple of times because my feet were so sore. Yeah, it was just a very long, punishing day. But once again, I knew I could do it. All you had to do was keep walking. Like, one of the things I've learned a long time ago that applies to these situations is that pain, discomfort, like, none of these things stop you from achieving anything. They just make it uncomfortable. They just make it a little hard. And, Saturday was a complete contrast to the Friday. I was not stopping to take videos, and I wasn't, going on about the scenery. I wasn't videoing myself, putting myself on my stories as frequently. It was very much like focusing on just doing what needed to be done and getting through. So off I went through the next 40 miles. So I went through Inveranon's across the water, but past Inveranon, past Crianlarich, and then to Tindrum. Oh, I'm never sure how to pronounce it. Tindrum or Tindrum. Now here's the cool thing. I got to Tindrum and I walked through this campsite. Now I just phoned my dad because I knew Tindrum was coming up. I kept trying to decide where I was going to stop and sort my feet and get something to eat and a coffee and whatever. And, I would get to somewhere and I'd be like, nah, keep going. Or I would go past an honesty box. I'd be like, nah, just keep going. But then I called my dad. I was like, what's in Tindrum? Because I couldn't remember for the life of me. And he was like, oh, you'll get something to eat there. There's the Green Welly stop. I went, oh, that's where that is. Right, that's fine. If you know where the Green Welly stop is, it's like a big tourist destination, like a kind of gateway destination to the Highlands where people stop off and waste money on souvenirs and eat expensive, overpriced service station type food, which is what I did. But before that, I came through this campsite. Now I'm just trying to see if I can find the campsite on the map. Oh, it doesn't really say. I remember that bit, the legend of the lost sword. There's apparently somebody threw a sword into a river. No, I can't remember which campsite it was. I walked through this campsite and came round the corner, and there was my neighbour's car. So my neighbour, maybe this one. Bin Glass campsite, maybe? I think it was that one. There was my neighbour's car. I was like, what is going on here? I recognised the reg plate, and it was someone that lives in our estate that we know and talk to, and I meet them on dog walks. Our two dogs get on well. And I thought, oh, they must be here climbing a hill. I had a look around. There was a couple of big peaks. I know they like climbing hills, so I thought, yeah, they must be up here doing something. So I took a picture of the car, sent it to my wife. I was like, look at this, look what I've just seen. And I carried on. 10 minutes along the road, and a black dog comes bounding towards me, and I was like, is that Jura? And I just heard somebody shout, Jura. And here we go, I met my two neighbours. Miles from home, on the West Highland Way, on this obscure path along a river, and here's two people from home, which was lovely. But yeah, got to Tyndrum, went to the Green Welly stop. The first thing I did was go to the toilets. Now, apologies, people of the Green Welly stop, if anyone's listening, for the mess I made. I was soaked, obviously, so I stripped off in a cubicle, a toilet cubicle. We don't have like changing facilities. I stripped off, hung my bag up, hung my trousers, everything up, got my boots off, got my socks off, dried my feet, taped them up. So I was starting to get a couple of little hot spots, as you can imagine, walking for hours in soaking wet feet. Taped them all up like a mummy because the tape was slipping around because my feet were wet. Taped up my individual toes that were starting to give me a little bit trouble. Powdered on my feet. Took some painkillers. Got dry socks on. Put my wet boots back on, but what can you do? And then got everything else back on again. And then stood up and I was like, do you know what? That's actually much better. It was still very painful, but I thought if I go get something to eat, these painkillers will start to kick in and take away some of the aches that I'm getting, and I should be alright. So, through to the restaurant, macaroni, cheese and garlic bread, coffee, juice. I felt a bit revitalised again. There's a little shop next to the Green Welly stop before you carry on the path. Went in there, got more painkillers while I was there, and then I phoned Claire. And that was really when I got very emotional on the phone to Claire. You know, I could feel the pain in my feet. I was like, how am I going to carry on? But it was just because I had stopped and taken a break. I'd taken that, you know, I'd already been experiencing this pain in my feet. The problem was I'd just given myself a break from it. Which is the worst thing you can do sometimes, but you obviously have to rest. But once I got going again, the path from Tyndrum along to, where are we? Bridge of Orkney was actually pretty good. It was very consistent. If I remember right, this is the one that was called Old Military Road. Yeah, so I kept looking at the map. It was very long. It was very flat. The scenery was lovely. It was pretty good. It wasn't too difficult. Then I got to Bridge of Orkney. I can't really remember too much about this part. I think I was just in survival mode. Munro Cottages. I don't think that's... Yeah, the next one was a King's House. Right, okay. So yeah, I got through all this bit. This bit is actually a blank. I must have zoned out for much of this and just kept walking because I'm looking at the path like, I don't remember too much of this. I think I'll go drive the route one day because I want to see it all again. But yeah, this is when things started to get nasty. Okay, so when I got to Glencoe, let's see if I can find the start point on the map. I got to something called the Glencoe Drovers Road. Now, this, I imagine, a Drovers Road would be how they used to get the livestock down from the Highlands to wherever the market was in the olden days. Now, I had already been walking for 11 hours by this point, and I reached the part where there was a sign and it was like Glencoe Drovers Road, and it was a cobbled path. Now, I was on this cobbled path for about 4 hours, and that was the worst of the entire day. The whole thing, being wet, having wet feet, all the rest of it, that was the thing that almost broke me. 4 hours of constant cobbles under your feet, uneven ground, pounding achy feet against this path that was more or less all uphill as well. That was the tough part. But eventually got there, and I came, it was getting, I came down the main road and I could see, I started to come round the side of this kind of mountain to where the Glencoe Mountain Resort is, and I could see the King's House Hotel in the distance. Now, I actually had to stop and put, I was in my shorts at that point. I had to stop and put my waterproof trousers back on. I had to put an extra couple of layers on up top because it was starting to get cold. It was like 8 o'clock at night. I eventually got to the King's House Hotel, which is beautiful, by the way. Google it. Expensive, but beautiful. Sits right in the middle of the mountains. I got there at 10 o'clock at night. So I had left at 5-ish. It couldn't have been 5 because it was 15 hours. I must have. No, whatever it was. I think I'd left at 5-ish, maybe closer-ish to 6, half 5, 6. And I think I got there at like 10 to 10, like actually at the reception for 10 to 10 at night. 40 miles. 15 hours something. So, and this is the part that even though it was the worst day, it also ended up the best day, okay? So you can imagine the elation I felt just walking through the doors of this hotel, getting there, because I was under pressure. I was starting to get concerned. I knew I could do it, but I knew that time was also against me. I had to get there for a reasonable time, not just because it wasn't that dark, because it's still the summer, but in my head I'm like, do you know what, I need to get there because I need time to get sorted, to get washed, to eat, to get to sleep, to get back up again, to do day 3, because there was also pressure on day 3 to make it to Fort William to get my train. So there was a lot of kind of time pressure here, but the train had got cancelled anyway, so that took a lot of pressure off. But I walked through the doors of the King's House Hotel. I was supposed to be staying in the bunkhouse, and I walked through the door and I was like, there is no fucking way I am sharing a room with 8 other people in these 3 high bunk beds in a room. It's 10 o'clock at night, half of them will be sleeping. I'm going to go in and start crashing about. I was like, fuck this. Got to the desk. What hotel rooms do you have? Do you have any available? I went, yep. He goes, but the rate's £290. Now, I would have paid it. I didn't say anything because the guy straight away said, but I'll take that down to a flat 200 for you, and I'll transfer your £50 over from the bunkhouse, so it'll be 150 quid. So he essentially took it down like 50%. I was like, do it. Do it. And that was when things got really good, because I was talking to him, and a girl who just came back from somewhere that worked there was blethering and asking questions, and I told them where I'd come from, and the two of them were like, holy fuck. Explained to them it was for charity, and then they were very friendly. Have you had anything to eat? Let me go and see what's left in the kitchen. I'll give you a phone and let you know what's there. So I got to my room, started running my bath, got all my shit off, got everything off. Guy phoned me. We've got some venison pies. And in my head, I was thinking of like a Scotch pie, like a small pie that had venison in it. And I went, anything, whatever, mate, I'll take it. And if you could send me like a pint of cola or something as well, that would be great. Trying to get some calories into me again. And he chapped the door with this massive, and honestly, it was like a 8 or 9 inches, big round dish. And it was like a steak pie, not like some Scotch pie. It was like a steak pie, but it was venison inside, and vegetables and everything. Oh my God. Can you imagine how much I enjoyed that after everything I'd done that day? Plus my pint of cola. And the pint of cola was a funny one because I had a 3-litre bladder of water in my backpack with a hose coming out of it, a big long straw. And I had bought rehydration tablets, so like the SIS sports tablets, the ones that you get, I'm trying to think of the Barocca, how Barocca comes in that tube, those efflorescent tablets. Well, I'd got those, but I thought, I was looking at all the flavours, I went, these cola ones, I'll go with them. Fuck me. Because the bladder was down my back, I was, for the first hour, great, cold tap water temperature juice, basically, but for the rest of the time it was like whatever temperature my back was what temperature the water was. So I'd already been drinking warm cola water for 2 days now, so I've got a kind of funny relationship with cola at the moment. But anyway, I had my bath, I got stripped, video called my wife and my sons, did my Instagram stuff, destroyed the venison pie. I'll forget that. I'll never forget that meal for as long as I live, and I'll never forget that day, that night into the morning, because the following morning I woke up. I didn't sleep great at all during the whole thing. I'm not sure why, but I was having very kind of worried, sweaty sleeps like I've had in the past when I've struggled with anxiety and stuff. I was probably just worrying about the pressure of, getting all this done, but managed to get some sleep. Had another lovely shower in the morning. I forgot to mention, the place had a drying room, a phenomenal drying room. So all of my stuff, all my socks that were all soaked that I'd been swapping over, my jacket, my trousers, my boots, all went in this amazing drying room. And I went down to get it all in the morning. And oh my goodness, just the fact that everything had lost like a couple of kilos in water weight was phenomenal. My boots were bone dry in and out. I got my feet taped up, I got them powdered, I got my fresh dry socks on into my fresh dry boots. I felt pretty good in the morning. My feet, yes, were sore, but I took painkillers. And this is the next best bit. I went downstairs to check out, and the staff had been great. They'd given me a shot of a charger because my charging cable had broke for charging my battery pack, which was going to run out, and I was going to have no phone for most of the last day. My phone hadn't charged overnight because of the stupid cable getting water in it the day before. Anyway, they've been so helpful. So as I was checking out, I was like, is there any chance I could get like something hot to eat before I leave? She went, oh, there was breakfast included with your room. And honestly, she must have seen the look on my face. My jaw would have just dropped. She went, so if you just go through there to the right, you'll help yourself to the buffet breakfast. And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Walked through to the restaurant. The restaurant's incredible. Glass windows all round, looking onto the mountains. And here were all these individual, those metal serving things where you lift the lid open yourself and it's all there. I had the biggest fry-up ever. Haggis, black pudding, sausage, egg, beans, bacon, toast, tatty scone. What did I have? A couple of glassy orange juice, a couple of cups of coffee. I was revitalised. So my feet were all intact. My painkillers had kicked in. I just destroyed easily a 1,500 calorie breakfast. I knew I was going to have plenty of fuel in the tank. Got chatting to a couple of people around me, telling them what I was doing, because they saw me struggling to stand up and stuff. And I was like, I came from Inversnaid yesterday. And again, they were like, fucking hell. And they were trying to hand me money. I explained I was doing it for charity, and they all went into their purses and their wallets and they're trying to throw 5s and 10s at me. I went, if you go, I gave them, they took a photo of the Just Giving page. I got it up on my phone. They took a picture of it so they could go find it later. And, when I was going through the comments, I went back and they're all on there. Lovely to meet you at the hotel. Good luck with your last day. It was so nice. So off I went. King's House Hotel, left there. I actually gave myself, because my train was cancelled on the Sunday, it took all the pressure off. And I just enjoyed the last day. This was to be the shortest day at 27 miles. So we had done 32, 40. This was to be 27 or thereabouts. Whatever adds up to 96. But it was going to be the shortest day and a little tough, but not that tough. It was tougher. People made it out to be tougher than it was. They tried to fill me with dread about doing the Devil's Staircase, which ended up to be nothing. There were a couple of big inclines after that, but apart from that, the last day was relatively quiet. I had no signal for a long time. So yeah, I left the King's House Hotel and I was sending my wife video messages and I was like very hyper, like, woohoo, let's go. And she was very happy knowing that I was feeling better than I was the day before. My feet felt good, my legs felt good. Once the painkillers kicked in and everything eased off, I was like, yep, I can do this. I am going to get to that finish line tonight. But I lost signal for a long time. But I was up very high, incredible scenery, lots of pictures, loads of waterfalls. It barely rained. I was in my shorts the whole day. That's a lie. I was in my shorts until there was a big downpour. Just, there'd been no cover for a long time. And just as I approached this little patch of trees, there was a downpour. So I ran into the trees to get cover, put my waterproof trousers on, and of course, the fucking sun came out afterwards. But because it's such an upheaval to undo laces, take boots off, and it's horrible taking boots off and putting them on again when you just want to get going, I kept the trousers on. I did eventually get to a point where I took them off because it was getting too hot again. But anyway, I walked into Fort William, and here's the last part of my story. Now, it was a beautiful walk. You were way up in the hills. As I say, no signal for a long time. My wife was getting a bit worried. But once I did eventually start getting close to Fort William. In fact, I stopped in Kinlochleven, went into a pub, had a coffee, chilled out for just 10-15 minutes, the tail race in, and then cracked on again. And that was me all the way to Fort William. So yeah, here's the thing. You don't really need a map because it's well signposted. Like, anytime you come up to a point where you're like, oh, which way should I go? There's always a little post there with a little white thistle on it just to keep you on track. Plenty of signs for the West Highland Way. You can't really go wrong. But I kept dipping into my Google Maps because I was trying to get arrival times. That was the thing. I wanted to know, predicting what time I'm going to get there at. So when I did this for Fort William, it had set the end point where it wasn't supposed to be, basically, right? So I came round this corner and it's like 30 minutes to go. I was like, you beauty, 30 minutes. I can't believe it. I'm actually going to get there at a reasonable time. So I got there and I was like, yeah, I don't see Fort William. I don't see civilization. I don't see any water. This can't be right. And I checked my maps again and it had just set it to some waypoint. So I went in like Fort William, it's not West Highland Way, end. And it changed it. It was another 30 minutes away. And I went, do you know what? That's fine. This didn't look right anyway. I'm glad I've not made a mistake or I've not went the wrong way. So another 30 minutes, I come into Fort William and there's this sign that says the original end of the West Highland Way. I went, what do you mean the original end? Where's the end then? I don't want... And then I checked it. Another 15 minutes to get to the middle of Fort William where the official end of the West Highland Way was. And it was very anticlimactic, as I said earlier. It was just a statue of a guy sitting on a bench. But fortunately, there was a guy there to take my picture next to it. I can't remember the exact time. All the way back, I was like... All the way there... or the last part anyway, I'm like, right, what am I going to do for dinner tonight? What do I really, really, really fancy? And I'll phone my wife and get her to find somewhere good and book a table for me. So I went out for an Indian to get a korma, which was all right. It wasn't great, but it was fine. Then I went to the Witherspoons for a pint of Brewdog. And then I went to my B&B, which one of my incredible members donated for me. So my few mentions, Nicola Mackay phoned my bed and breakfast. So because my train was cancelled, I had to book a bed and breakfast for the night. Nicola Mackay, one of my clients, called and paid for my bed and breakfast for me. My good friend, Sam McKenzie, booked, when I was walking towards Fort William, I jokingly said, if anyone would like to donate a sports massage, like as in if there was any people that could do it following me that wanted to donate one, I jokingly said. But then my friend Sam went and booked a spa day for my wife and I. A friend of my wife's who works for ScotRail arranged my ticket for me on the Monday. So taking my ticket from 60 quid down to the friends and family rate of £6, which was tremendous as well. So, and on top of that, everyone that got in touch, honestly, every single text, every response to a story, every DM, every voice note, my meditation coach sent my voice note, my friends were sending me voice notes, the video calls, the reactions to stories, even just share, everybody that donated, the total is £2,095. I'm going to add another £5 onto that just to round it off at 2-1. Everyone that donated, and everyone that donated non-financially, sharing stories, sharing posts, publicising it anywhere. It was a tremendous weekend on social media, and I was fortunate to have a signal for a lot of it as well. So I seen everything that went on. So there you have it. Any advice I would give to people in the future? Number one, don't do it in 3 days. If you really want to do it in 3 days and the weather is good on the first day, walk farther. That was, when my wife said to me, would you do anything differently? I said, yeah, I would have went farther on the first day. My feet were good. My legs were good. I got to Inversnaid at 5 p.m. I think the next stop after Inversnaid was Inverarnon, which was another 6.5 miles, which would probably have been another 2 hours of walking. So had I added that extra 2 hours onto the first day and stopped in Inverarnon first of all, I would have probably got there about 7, 8 o'clock at night. But I would have been 2 hours closer for day 2, meaning day 2, I would have probably got there about 7, 8 o'clock at night as well. But I don't know if I would change it or not, because I really enjoyed my first night. It was very memorable, and stopping in Inversnaid was lovely. But in terms of being strategic and just kind of my experience and me wishing I could have taken a couple of hours off of the second day, that would be the only thing I would change. But I am going to do it again in the future, but it will very much be a holiday. Like when I was walking on the path, there are vans going past you all day. West Highland Way baggage transport, like minivans, 7-seaters, people with cars. Basically, it's a baggage handling service. So you arrive at an accommodation, you wake up in the morning, you leave your big bag in a pile, and they take it to your next stop. So you're free just to wander. I was walking with like 20 kilos on my back for the full thing, with all my clothes and food and fluids for the weekend. Anyway, this is a very niche episode, and there will be a few people that it does benefit. I hope it's helpful. Again, as ever, reach out to me if you want to ask anything, or you want to clarify anything from someone that's, done it and walked the route. Just drop me an email. I'm happy to reply. Jason@munronutrition.com. Thanks for listening. I hope it's been helpful.